Okay, so I think April did a really good job of covering, what is the state of girls in sport right now, and how girls are engaging in sport. And what we're finding is, if you look at any of the research that the Women's Sports Foundation has done, you'll find that girls are dropping out of sport at twice the rate of boys, especially by the age of 14. And so some of that has to do with, a positive coach, a positive role model. You've heard from the panels today and yesterday about how instrumental a coach is in the life, especially in the life of a girl athlete. And it's a major factor to keeping girls involved in sports and getting the most out of the sport. What we're learning is that the gender ratio is far lower when you look at the percentage of women that are coaching compared to the number of girls that are playing. And so we need to do our part to, number one, keep girls playing, and number two, keep women coaching. And that's really what our She Changes the Game initiative is about at Up2Us Sports. And it's also what the Keep Girls in Sport curriculum is about, which we've created with Adidas. So like I said before we started all of this, is that you're going to see within this training just some confirmation from what a lot of the women were talking about during the symposium. Number one, in the Keep Girls in Sport curriculum, what you'll learn is that relationships matter, and that you have to develop a way to cultivate positive relationships between your coaches, your athletes, and all of your team members. You'll learn that having a supportive team culture, I think it was Penny and Angela that talked about team culture and how that encourages participation and growth within your organization, within your team. Recognize what we do really well here at Up2Us Sports is help coaches recognize the different stressors that athletes have in the framework. Know what the framework is that you have to work around when you're working with your athletes. Know who they are. Girls on the Run just did an absolutely wonderful job of having an activity to find out who are the girls that you're working with. It's so important. It also teaches you to master tactics for cultivating sports and life skills for young athletes, and how to understand girls and how they're different in the way that we need to coach them, the way that we need to mentor them. So I really, really implore you, this is a free training for anybody. You can go to keepgirlsinsport.com and take that training, and you'll get loads and loads of information. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to go a little bit further than what you get in that digital curriculum. So there's also research out there that says that not only are girls quitting because of factors such as transportation and not feeling safe and not feeling like they belong. There's something that happens to girls, teenage girls between 13 and 18, who may have had a little bit of longevity in their sport, but you come to this moment where you say, I love my sport, I absolutely love it, but now it's time for me to decide, am I going to continue with this sport or am I going to stop? And some of the reasons why teenage girls say that they are stopping and quitting their sport, number one is because they didn't see a future in it for themselves. And you've heard the panelists talk about, doesn't matter what that future looks like. Doesn't have to be, professional sports. Doesn't even have to be collegiate sports. We need to start training our girls how to see a future for themselves, not just in sport, but in life. The second reason was because they felt like they needed to prioritize academics and other extracurricular activities. I hear this all the time from my athletes about, yeah, I love my sport, but I'm going to go to college and I don't know that I'm going to be able to manage prioritizing, my sport and academics and how do I do all of that? And there's some fear behind that. And if you listen to some of the girls last night on the girl panel, that is a concern for them that this is tough. The time management piece is tough and I need to figure out how do I do that? And it's only going to get a little bit harder. And so we as coaches, as mentors, as parents have to teach them how to prioritize so that and have them understand that it is possible to do both. The third reason was that they thought they weren't good enough to go further. And I really implore you as you work with young girls to take the focus off of the winning, the scholarship, the going pro. That is all a part of a mindset, right? Where we want to be the best and we want to do all that. And that is really, really great. But there also has to be a balance with this idea that I'm not good enough. I think you heard Colette say that she thought that she wasn't good enough playing football. However, she used the skill set that she had to go as far as she possibly could. And it may not be playing, but it ends up being something else. And then the fourth issue is that they're missing out on a social life. And I hear this all the time from our teenage girls that, you have friends who are playing a sport and you have friends who aren't. And they seem to be having so much more fun than the ones who have to go to practice. But this is but a very small portion of their lives. And so we have to make them see that. We have to help them see that yes, it is important to have a social life, but there is a way to do both. So another thing that I think that we need to do as we are coaching girls and working with girls is that we also need to make sure that we are educating them on why it's important for them to stay in sports. I know that we talk about it as adults all the time. Oh, women in C-suite level positions have been former athletes, and girls who play sports graduate from high school and continue their education. Girls who play sports have higher self-esteem and higher levels of confidence. All of these things we talk amongst ourselves, but I think that we have to start being intentional. That word again came up in the symposium, that we have to be intentional about how we're talking to girls. And they need to be a part of this conversation about why it's important for them to stay in sport. So I think one of the things that we can move forward with our young girls is coaching for mental toughness and grit. If you listen to the panelists on in the symposium over the last 2 days, you heard women and girls who had tremendous amount of mental toughness to be able to endure the things that they've endured within their positions, within their sport, but they also had this grit, right? They had this desire, this passion for what they're doing, that no matter what, they're not going to stop because of the passion and the goals that they've set for themselves. And I think that needs to be a part of how we train girls. It can't just be we just expect them to know that. It has to be a part of the training. And so when we talk about mental toughness training, really what we're talking about is, girls on the run, April said it before, part of mental toughness training is strategies for controlling your thoughts, your emotions, your decisions, your attitude, your effort. And one of the greatest things that you can do, which April took us through, is visualization, guided imagery. Teach your girls how to sit with themselves and their thoughts and see themselves doing wonderful things, not going to a negative place, but going to a positive place, seeing themselves evolve, seeing themselves grow, seeing themselves excel. That's a very important strategy for girls to learn to do. And it's not one that you just pick up, it's something that you have to practice over and over and over again. Another part of mental toughness is setting goals for yourself. You hear the women talk about goals that they set for themselves within their sport, within their careers. And a lot of those goals, when you're talking about athletes, yes, the ultimate goal, the ultimate outcome goal is that you want to win. We all want to win. But just as valuable is setting goals for how you perform and setting goals for what the process is to get you there. And so those are the three different types of goals that we need to start teaching girls to do for themselves. Don't just focus on the outcome, focus on the process of getting there, focus on your performance while you're doing it. And then again, we had Girls on the Run take you through some exercises on how you change your self-talk. Penny mentioned that you'd be astounded, and I know those of you that work with girls, if you've ever sat down and asked them to give you an honest and open picture of the thoughts that they have about themselves and the conversations that they have about themselves, some of the negativity that you hear is astounding. And one of the things that I always say to girls is, would you say those things that you say to yourself, would you ever say them to your teammate? And if the answer is no, then you cannot give yourself permission to say it to yourself. So we've got to start training girls how to change how they talk to themselves, how they speak about themselves, what they think about themselves. And then the second part of that training is grit. And that really is where these things merge, your motivation, your reason for why you do what you do, then also having that direction and that goal. And somewhere in the middle, that sweet spot is that grit, right? You heard it throughout this whole symposium. Grit, the passion for what they do, being able to persevere through adversity, being persistent in doing things over and over and over again, and having a focus, and also acknowledging the constant growth that happens and knowing that you're never fully there, that you always have room to grow. That's what that grit is. And I think that we have to start teaching our girls how to do that. So I'm going to leave you with a few coaching strategies about how do you do this. If you're a coach of an athlete, if you're a mentor, how do you start sitting down within your practices or outside of your practices and actually use some strategies? So the first thing you need to do is to schedule regular mental training and grit training sessions that are outside of your practice. You've got to get on the same page as a team. If you're in a team sport, you need to get on the same page in terms of your culture, in terms of what is our goal, what are we trying to accomplish together as a team, how are we going to communicate, how are we going to help each other forget about the mistakes and focus on all of the good things that we're doing. You've got to schedule time to do that. It doesn't always happen naturally in a practice. The second strategy is to incorporate game scenarios. This goes to that ability to persevere, right? So you set game-like scenarios where you're up by 5 and you have to finish, or you're down by 5 and you have to come back, or you're tied and you have to fight, or you're physically tired. We do practices sometimes where we make them run. They're physically tired and fatigued, and now you have to play in a game-like situation and see if you can persevere and push through that. And then the last thing is, one of the coaches on the coach panel mentioned this, is that you have to ask questions. It goes to the sport IQ, yes it does, but it also goes to help girls create and develop these critical thinking skills, the ability to make decisions on their own. And all of these things are things that they need, yes, within their sport, but they absolutely need them to get where they want to be in life, as you saw all of the women on the panel. So with that being said, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I know we did not fill the full hour. I know it's been a long day of just motivation and inspiration from hearing from our panelists and our keynote speakers. But I think that this is a good place to stop, and this is a good place to give you all food for thought in terms of how do I do this? How do I help these girls become strong women? And so I thank you. Allie and April, thank you so much for doing this with me. This was an awesome training. We got right to it. I'm sure some people probably appreciate that. But thank you so much for doing this with us. And I want to thank all of you guys that are out there watching and have been with us throughout the whole entire symposium.
Thank you so much, Ahada, for bringing this to life. It's been amazing. So.